This video is brought to you by SpikesAcademy.com, the world's first Magic the Gathering e-learning academy. You can get 10% off over at SpikesAcademy.com with the code GOLDFISH, and you can learn more at Spikes_Academy on Twitter. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another Instant Deck Tech. As you know, Tuesday means it's Type 2 or Standard Tuesday, but as we wait for War of the Spark to officially come out, today we're looking at a future standard deck. So you can't play this one quite yet, but it is a sweet hypothetical deck that comes from Todd Anderson over at Star City Games. That is Orzhov Citadel Aristocrats, combining Orzhov Aristocrats with Bolas' Citadel to have a really sweet sacrifice themed deck. So a quick reminder before we break down Orzhov Citadel Aristocrats for Standard. If you enjoy this deck and you'll want to see it made into videos, take a minute, click the like button, the subscribe button, leave a comment, anything you can do to support your deck, because whichever deck is most popular gets a shot at being made into videos next week. So, Orzhov Citadel Aristocrats, while it has a bit of a twist compared to normal Aristocrat decks, it still has the same formula as most Aristocrat strategies, which is sacrifice fodder, sacrifice outlets, and finishers. So let's walk through these steps, starting with our 1-drop sacrifice fodder. So in the 1-drop slot, we have 3 different creatures that kind of like to die, or at least are okay with dying. Footlight Fiend, when it dies, we get to deal 1 damage to something, which, I mean, it's fine. Damage is always good. Worst case, we throw it at our opponent's face. Best case, we sacrifice it and kill a 1 toughness creature. Hunted Witness, on the other hand, when it dies, gives us a 1/1 soldier, which, some nice value. We can sacrifice it twice, essentially. And then Gutter Bones gives us a recursive Savannah Lions. As long as we deal damage to our opponent, we can pay 2, bounce it back to our hand from our graveyard, so we can sacrifice it potentially multiple times in a game, because it just keeps coming back from the graveyard. Plus, it chips in for damage. So these cards start off recurve early, start getting in damage, and are perfectly acceptable with our sacrifice plan. Then we have one of our better payoffs in the deck, and one of our biggest new additions, which is Cruel Celebrate. So we've been talking for months now about how Aristocrats really needs a Blood Artist. Blood Artist, Suleport, Cutthroat, those are the cards that traditionally makes a Aristocrat style deck work, and we just didn't have one in Standard. We had Judith, it's 3 mana, it's kind of there. We have 4 mana versions, but Cruel Celebrant is just a straight up Blood Artist. Whenever another creature or Planeswalker we control dies, we get to drain for 1. Opponent loses 1, we gain 1. Only 2 mana, has an extra toughness so it doesn't die to Footlight Fiend, I guess, but a very solid Orzhov version of Blood Artist. So with this card, we can stack up all of our cheap sacrifice fodder, sacrifice all of our cheap sacrifice fodder, and potentially just drain our opponent out of the game. So that's kind of step 2. Along with Cruel Celebrant, we have Midnight Reaper, which doesn't deal damage, well, to our opponent when stuff dies, but when our non-token creatures die, we get to draw a card. So this keeps us churning through our deck as we're sacrificing. Another good payoff for sacrificing our board. Then we have Plaguecrafter, which is kind of our first sacrifice outlet. It's kind of a weird one. It's more of a value card, honestly, in this deck. When it comes into play, we got to sacrifice a creature. Our opponent has to sacrifice a creature or a Planeswalker. If they can't, they discard a card. So in our deck, we have plenty of janky things to sacrifice. All of our 1-drops are great to sacrifice, so theoretically, our opponent's going to have to sacrifice a real creature, or maybe even like a Teferi in the best case scenario, while we're sacrificing a random 1-drop that isn't that relevant or makes a token or deals a damage, so we break the symmetry on Plaguecrafter pretty easily. But our biggest sacrifice outlets are Pitiless Pontiff and Priest of Forgotten Gods, along with one card that we'll talk about in a minute. But Pitiless Pontiff, while we do have to pay 1 mana to sacrifice a creature, when we do, we're able to give it Death Touch and Indestructible, so great on defense, good on offense if we want to chip in for damage, and if we have a bunch of mana, we can sacrifice our whole board, get a ton of Cruel Celebrant triggers, maybe drain our opponent out of the game, draw a bunch of cards with Midnight Reaper. Priest of Forgotten Gods, also incredibly powerful, a little more restrictive than Pitiless Pontiff, sacrifices exactly 2 creatures each turn. When we tap it, it is free, no mana required, and actually makes mana, so it ramps us into some of our bigger plays, which is more relevant in this deck than some Aristocrats decks. Plus, we drain our opponent, we get to draw a card, so a very powerful sacrifice outlet. Opponent also goes down a creature, so these are our main sacrifice outlets. Aristocrats. Then we have Bolas' Citadel, and this is the card that the deck is really built around. So Bolas' Citadel, one of the sweetest cards from War of the Spark. 6 mana, legendary artifact. We get to look at and play the top card of our library whenever we want to. However, if we cast a spell from the top of our library, we get to pay life instead of paying its mana cost, which that sounds kind of painful, but really, our deck is really cheap. Mostly 1 mana, 2 mana, so we can cast a lot of spells with life, and then it becomes a super sack outlet, where we sack 10 permanents, non-land permanents, and each opponent loses 10 life. So this card does everything in our deck. First off, we can ramp into it with Priest of Forgotten Gods. Secondly, the life that we gain with Cruel Celebrant helps fuel our Bolas' Citadel. Third, because we have so many cheap creatures, we can play this very similarly to a Experimental Frenzy, where we're able to just play a whole bunch of cards in the same turn, but we don't even need mana to do it. We can just do it all with life, and then if we get up to 10 non-land permanents, it should just win us the game. We sacrifice it, hopefully we have a Cruel Celebrant or two to get even more draining out of sacrificing our creatures, and one activation just kills our opponent. So ideally, that's what we'll do with the deck, is play our random janky sacrifice fodder, stick some Cruel Celebrants, some sacrifice outlets, eventually get down the Bolas' Citadel, chain together a ton of spells off the top of our deck, sacrifice everything, and just 20 our opponent out of the blue with Bolas' Citadel. Worst case, we can use it for a lot of value, just like playing 2 or 3 cards each turn without even spending mana, and still being able to cast spells from our hand, unlike Experimental Frenzy, is really powerful and just an insane source of card advantage. So that's basically the deck. We also have a new Planeswalker edition in Sorin, Vengeful Bloodlord, and this one is mostly in the deck for the negative X, which allows us to reanimate a creature with converted mana cost X or less. So if we can do this with like Hunted Witness, for example, we get a ton of value. We can get back a creature for just negative 1x, and then we're able to sacrifice it twice because it makes that token, get it back again. So it gives us a ton of ways to get bodies back from the graveyard, great with Cruel Celebrant, all this stuff we're sacrificing. Otherwise, mana base, a bunch of dual lands, some basic lands. In the sideboard, for control, we get Daravel, Rogue, Shadow Mage, basically a really cheap Angrath that does run out eventually, but just ticks down, makes our opponent discard some cards, pressuring the control deck, sneaking in under counters, maybe even dealing some damage. Dreadhorde Invasion in the control matchups, pretty insane. We can sacrifice the Amass token every turn, so we build our own Bitter Blossom, essentially, plus in grindy matchups where opponents killing all of our stuff, it gives us a repeatable source of creatures. Duress to attack our opponent's hand, get rid of those Teferis, those Wraths, those Wilderness Reclamations. For more aggressive decks, we have some more removal. Obnixlus's Cruelty, a great new addition from War of the Spark, killing most things in the format for 3 mana, instant speed, even exiling. Vraska's Contempt gets rid of Planeswalkers too. Demystify, in case we gotta get rid of an enchantment, I guess. Unsure why this isn't Mortify. And that is Orzhov Citadel Aristocrats for War of the Spark standard. And that's our instant deck for today. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.